Yep.
Okay, everybody, I am recording. If everybody could please authorize the recording, that would be wonderful. So people who can't be here today are able to watch it later. I know there are lots of people who want to watch it, and I think this might be our co-presenter coming in. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Danner. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here for us.
Thank you so much, Alan, for having us. I really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. If you haven't met me before, my name's Jennifer. I'm a crime prevention coordinator with the Seattle Police Department. I've done a couple different programs with Alan at the Hearthstone already, and this is our monthly event that we're calling Conversations with a Cop. Today, it's just going to be conversations with SPD employees because both of our presenters are not sworn officers. So both Mark and I are civilian members of the department, meaning we are not sworn officers, so we do not have guns and badges, but we still work for the police department and do a variety of things for them. So it looks like my co-presenter is here with us audibly. Mark, are you here?
I am, Jen. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role with SPD, Mark?
Absolutely. So my name is Mark Bridge, and I'm the director of the Data-Driven Policing Program with the Seattle Police Department. And a little bit about what we do is we use a lot of the data that's collected out in the field, either through 911 calls or reports that are made that end up turning into crime reports you'd probably most be familiar with, and analyzing that data and sharing it back with the department as well as the community. So that way folks are informed about what's going on and where.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. So guys, what the structure of today is going to be like is Mark is going to tell us a little bit about crime data, and I'm going to do my best to visually display what he is talking about as he talks about it. So I'm going to show my screen and show you how to access the data that Mark's going to talk about. And then we'll kind of go through how we look at data just for our neighborhood or how we look at data for a specific precinct and compare it to previous years. So Mark, I'm going to pull up the website and we're going to kind of talk through how we get to crime data.
Thanks, Jen. And we'll see how well we do in tandem with this exercise. So
Yes.
I'm excited about it as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you for the introduction. And just for those that have joined us today, I will say I mostly prefer to do these in person. So I do look forward to the day and the time when we can all get back together in person, and happy to do this again or have continuous kind of education sessions, as well as take any feedback folks may have in order to produce better products that help inform the community. So with that open-mindedness, I just wanted to probably start from the beginning. Jen, the best way to go about this is just to open up. Sorry, someone's trying to call me in. Let me decline them so they quit bothering me. There we go. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. So the best way to start off here is just to go to any search engine like Google, something that you have that you pull up on your phone, or basically that you have on your computer. So Jen, if you just want to start there and type in the Seattle Police Department, that's the easiest way to find all the stuff I'm going to show you today.
All right, we have Google searched Seattle Police Department, and our first thing that pops up is the SPD's website, which is www.seattle.gov/police.
Perfect. So we just want to click on that and go in there. And that's where we're going to start kind of today's tutorial. There's a ton of information that you can find on this site. Not all of it is stuff that is relevant to today's conversation, obviously, but this is kind of the gateway or the portal, if you will, into the type of stuff that we're going to talk about today. So I think the easiest way to go is you're going to see the heading across the top that says Seattle Police Department. And right below that, you're going to see some subheadings that starts with need help, data and information, community policing, jobs, and about us. The one we're going to go to today is the second one. So Jen, if you would hover over and click on information and data and go to that page.
Excellent. We are on that page now.
All right. So this page has a couple of things. It features new kind of data dashboards that we're hosting, or maybe new projects that we're working on. And kind of clicking to any of them will get you to a page that shows you all the things that are available. But for the sake of today's conversation, we're going to pop over to the right side where it says crime dashboard, and there's a little cutout, and it actually is showing the SoDo neighborhood and has a little total underneath it. But by clicking on that, that's going to take us into the department's crime dashboard.
All right, we are on the crime dashboard.
Perfect. So thank you. So what you're going to see is if Jen just scrolls down a little bit, we'll still keep the crime dashboard heading in view. I just kind of want to talk about a little bit about the layout and the tabs that go across the top and what all you can actually see in here. So what we're looking at are the major crime reports for the city of Seattle. So these are when an officer is called out to a scene and they've determined that a crime has taken place, they fill out a report. And once that report
still
is
just for SoDo? Is this still just for SoDo? Or is this for the whole city?
Oh, this is for the whole city. We're looking at everything for the whole city right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the whole city. So the map will show
Yeah.
us kind of what we're looking at. And as Mark talks about it, then we'll drill down to specific neighborhoods or precincts too. Thanks, Ruth, for
No,
that
but
question,
good.
though.
Yeah, but good question. So it does open up to citywide just because we don't know who's interested in the data. So we open up to a citywide total. Then we kind of give you the ability to kind of move around in the city and do a little bit of driving. So I'll show you how to do that here in a second. But as far as the layout goes, I'm just going to go kind of top to bottom, left to right. What we started off with, and this is year end, since we just kind of completed the most full year of 2021, we've been kind of summarizing what data totals look like here because we're actually in the midst of finalizing the year-end report, which we release in a more detailed manner. It's coming out in a couple of weeks. But we break what we call violent crime and property crime. And then you can see below in the table, as Jen may hover over, what's all included in violent crime, as well as categories that are included in property crime. So these are taken from federal FBI's website. So we could classify these a lot of different ways, but one of the reasons we stick to this is it's a uniform report, meaning if we were to compare the city of Seattle to the city of Portland or Cleveland or Boston, we could look at what they use as far as their federal statistics, if you will, and be able to look at their homicide numbers compared to ours, and for rape and robbery and aggravated assault. They also provide very clear definitions, which helps police departments define the type of incident and give it a classification. So this just really helps us kind of uniformly label, classify, and then obviously compare ourselves to other places around the nation. So as you can see, what we're looking at right now, as when this data was last updated, which we update it once a month, and like I said, we're finishing on year ends right now. So as you can see right up above the top, Jen could probably hover over. We're always going to tell you when we last updated this. So this was updated at the end of November to include all of November. We haven't uploaded December's data here, just because we're finishing the year-end report, and then we'll kind of press go and then put all of December's data, which will probably be ready to go in about another week here. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time for these things to trickle in because people are reviewing them and reclassifying them, or reports come in after the fact. The cool thing about everything you're looking at here is once a month, we refresh this entire dashboard. So what that means is if something came in after the fact, when we updated it last time, it means we'll go back and catch that during the next update. So if it doesn't show this month, it definitely will show next month or the month after. Or if it gets reclassified for some reason, or somebody investigates it, or somebody steps forward and says, you know, that actually didn't happen, or I made that story up, whatever the case may be, it'll actually come out, because our commitment here is to kind of look at the most accurate data we can. So it's going to constantly move once a month. And that's okay, because this data isn't static, right? It is very fluid and flexible, and we would expect to see some of that. So the first caveat I always put out is don't be alarmed if you looked at a number and then when you go back, it changes a little bit. There are always reasons for that. So your table is going to be on the left-hand side, like I said, and you're going to be able to look at both your categories and the number of them over to the right-hand side. If we jump all the way over to the right, you're going to see, and Jen, if you're able just to scroll down a little bit so we get the whole map in the frame there. This is a map of the city right now. And what we have it broken out by is we're looking at everything citywide, but you can see that some areas are shaded. And if Jen is hovering over them, you'll see that they're currently labeled by what we call our micro community policing plans. So these are areas that roughly fall within general neighborhoods that most people would accept. And while they're not perfect boundaries, they fit within what we refer to as our policing boundaries, because we patrol a certain way in the city and we respond a certain way in the city. So some of these were drawn to also correspond with our patrol deployment. So the reason I mention that now is as we talk about and look at areas that may have be concern to you here in a little bit, whether a place you live or work or just are interested in, they might be neighborhoods that you agree with the alignment of. And then again, you might say, wait a minute, that's not quite, I call myself Green Lake versus Roosevelt, Ravenna. But I'll show you how to find that in a minute. So that way you at least know what we're calling your neighborhood on this map. So we start off with all of these neighborhoods. And as you scroll around, the darker the shading of the area, the heavier the count. So as you can see, if you go all the way up north and you look at Northgate, you can see all the way through November of 2021, there were a total of 2,719 of property and violent crime offenses reported for that specific area, as opposed to maybe moving over a little bit to Greenwood or down to Finney Ridge. And you can see the totals change a little bit, but the lighter shade they are, the less volume that's in there. This isn't based on population or anything. This is just based off raw numbers. And then below, Jen, if you scroll down just a little bit more, you're going to see a line graph. And what that's used for is that's just a monthly trend. So as you move around, if you're interested in a specific crime type or a certain area of the city, all of this stuff will update with your selections, which I'll show you how to do in a second. But the reason we have this is you can put prior years on here, you can look at prior months, and you can kind of see how things have been trending. And if you hover over any of the different lines, it will tell you if the month has been complete and how many total that we're looking at. And right now we're following, the totals are so high because we're looking at complete months for the entire city. Now we'll kind of go around how to move around here a little bit, because I think this is kind of the fun part, if you will. We have a lot of dashboards on this website, and the first thing I always tell people is I encourage them to poke around, play around when you have time. I'm only going to go through one of them really today, because once you know how to move around in one, they all work really similar. So the good news is we use the same software to build a lot of these dashboards. So once you know how to operate one, you become pretty familiar with how they all work. So the first thing I'm going to show you is across the top here, we have a series of what are called filters, and you'll see that they're labeled. They're in the gray box, and they start with year, and then they go to what we call a category, and then an offense, and just offense without it being in CSTAT, precinct, beat, neighborhood, map selection. And I'll go through what all these can do. So starting with the very first one, right now we're opening up to the 2021, which I said goes through the end of November. One of the things you can do is if you drop that filter down, you can see that we have data going back to 2008. And that's because that's how far we can go back with our system that's comparable. Obviously, we collected crime data before 2008, but we were in different systems that didn't count things the same way, or we moved to different paper in the early 2000s, 90s. That data and information is out there, but it's not integrated into this website because it wouldn't be apples to apples is the best way to explain it. And you'd have to look at it in a different way. We give it to researchers. You can find it in the federal report that the FBI has, but it is available. Jen, if one of the things you'll do, if you'll just select on 2020, so we can turn on the previous year and then click apply in the bottom right-hand corner, what you're going to see, and then just click on some white space and you should get rid of that, the gray box that's still appearing. And what you're going to see is we turned on for the complete year of 2020, we have the categories appear right next to it. And it works the same if you were to put on 2019, 2018, 2017. You could keep going back as far as you're interested in. One of the things you can start to do is you can start to compare. Now, if you scroll down very briefly to the line graph that I was showing you, the one thing you'll notice is we have an incomplete year. Now, there are different ways you can kind of tease this out. Jen, if you will just take your mouse, I know this can be a little tricky, but I think you got it. If you will just create a box with your mouse starting in January and grab both lines all the way to November and let go. We don't want December.
We don't
All right,
have
let me.
both.
I'm working on it. Hold on a second. Going back to
No
including
problem.
2020. For some reason, it didn't want to work for me. So let's see here. So we got 2020 and 2021 selected up top. So I'm going to try to drag it. And do you want all the way to November?
Yeah.
Okay.
What I was showing is you can kind of compare the same time frames. So that way, what we're really trying to do is see what's up and what's down as we kind of move around.
Yep, got it.
Okay, thank you. So the next filter I'm going to show you is what we call our CSAT categories. And really, these are just high level. And what this allows you to do is toggle between, maybe you just want to look specifically at property crime. And by looking at the table, you now know what's included in property crime. And by looking at violent crime, you know what's included in violent crime. So maybe you just want to look at the data. You're only interested in the violent crime. You just want to look at the property crime. That gives you the ability to toggle back and forth. When you go to the third checkbox, what you'll see is everything kind of rolls up into each other. So there's crime altogether, and then it goes to violent and property, and then there are subsets that live within. So there again, maybe now you want to specifically focus in just on burglaries that are in your neighborhood, or motor vehicle theft, or aggravated assault. You have the option to be able to pick something specific. And then if you move over to offense, you'll see this is kind of the lowest level of granularity that we have. So this is as far down as you can go with uniformity to be able to compare and look across time. So what we can now do is some of these stay kind of high level, like an aggravated assault, which has a definition that goes along with it. But also you can go down to things like that live underneath larceny theft, like pickpocketing or purse snatching, or maybe shoplifting. And you can start to see there's a little more granular level of detail. So this is just an effort to go down as far as we can to say, if there's a particular interest of yours, maybe you want to keep it high level. Maybe you want to try to look at something very specific like arson, or burglary, breaking and entering. So we just kind of give you the ability to be able to turn those on and turn those off, either by selecting the all button and clearing everything, and just selecting the categories if you're choosing. You can do any grouping you want. It just, when you're done, just remember to hit apply at the end. And that's what applies your selections to everything you're looking at, including the table as well as the map to your right.
I have a question.
Yes.
On this list, difference between if somebody breaks into a place and there's somebody there, or robbery when somebody breaks into a place and nobody's there. Do they have different names?
They would. So if nobody's there, it's going to be a burglary. If somebody's at home, it's most likely going to live in the robbery category.
Okay.
Because it
Jen-
involves yeah, no problem.
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say, typically, property crime doesn't involve a person. The minute we introduce a human being into it, it's going to tend to go into the category of violent or crimes against persons. And what we usually refer to, honestly, as home invasions, whether it's meant to be that or not.
Generally, when we think about burglary versus robbery, I kind of think of like burglary as someone that has broken into your home when you weren't present and taken something, whereas a robbery is maybe someone who threatened force or used force in order to take something. So that's kind of the difference. And as Mark said, if a person is involved, then generally it'll be in that sort of violent crime category. And if it's just kind of property, like a burglary or shoplifting, then that's mostly will live in that property crime section. But thank you, Ruth, for asking that question. That's a really good question, and something we get a lot is what's the difference between burglary and robbery? So thank you for asking.
No, it's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
So the next couple of filters I just wanted to share with you, this is the stuff that you can kind of move around by geography. I think the most thing that's relevant and that I want to focus on, to especially community members, are what we call the MCPP, which I explained and I'll explain again. But I just want to make mention of the others since they're here so that you know what they are. Precinct and beat are really police patrol areas, and sometimes we identify with those. I think as community members, we definitely, and generally say, I live up north, or I'm in Southwest, or, West Seattle, or I live down south. So I think those make some sense, but really just so that folks know, when we look at stuff like a precinct, what we're really talking about is a patrol standpoint. We have 5 precincts in the city, and these are where people go to work and they work out of, and this is where they start their day. So, for instance, if we just went up north, And if you select north, click on all, Jen, and then just select north, so it's the only thing selected, and then click apply. What you'll see is the map should update, and what it's showing you is all of North Precinct. And that's really more for, like I said, a deployment from our standpoint, but you may have an interest if you mostly live or have friends or family or businesses up in a certain area. It is something that I think is still of interest. We do allow you to go down to the beat. Whenever you do anything like this, you want to use the map selection. That's on the far right. And right now it's saying micro community policing plan. So what that means is the way that we're laying this out is going to be by neighborhood. If you wanted to change it to anything else, then you would change that selection out. For instance, if you were to click precinct, you're going to get one big square, and it's probably still on north if Jen has it still on north right now. But what it's showing you is, okay, this is everything that happened up north. And you can do that for west, which includes downtown. You can do that for east, which includes everything from like Madison Park to Cap Hill. You can go down south, and you can do that for southwest. But really what we end up doing, and a lot of people really relate to, is we put the map selection on MCPP, which, like I said earlier, stands for Micro Community Policing Plan. And this was an initiative that took off in conjunction with Seattle University several years ago, where we wanted to develop plans and response plans at a neighborhood level that could be tailored a little bit more to a neighborhood's needs. And while they won't match up necessarily with, say, the Department of Neighborhoods boundaries or maybe what you would call a certain neighborhood, what I found is in general, they follow some guidelines that are within our policing boundaries, because remember, they had to stay within certain boundaries for us to deploy to. So I only mention all that just because we may call a neighborhood something that you're like, no, that's not what I call Green Lake. And I come up against this all the time, and I tell people I didn't create them. But I can tell you from a boundary standpoint, it's how we deploy, it's how we reference them. And when you do select them, you will be looking at whatever point you're interested in that is contained within. So one of the best things we can do here, I always tell people as a reference point, I think it's always good to go ahead and find out which neighborhood you're interested in. And the best way to actually do that is, Jen, if you'll go to the left-hand side, do you see the long list on the navigation that says about micro community policing plans?
Yep. This one
Okay.
right here.
If you click on that, 2 locations down, it says location map, micro community policing plan location map.
Yep.
Let me know if you get a map.
Looks like my map is loading.
Okay, and it should, and it'll take a
Yep.
quick second. But this is a reference guide. So what this is really cool for is, because not everybody's going to call neighborhoods the same things, and we know that, we at least want people to know how we're referring to them. So what we really recommend here is, if you have an address of interest, Jen, if you can see in the top left-hand side where there's a little magnifying glass, if you click in there, type an address, and let's type a relevant one. So, I mean, if we've got one that we can put in where we're speaking to today, if that's relevant, or we just want to throw something in, if someone's got a suggestion, happy to do that.
Use ours. Ours is 6720 East Green
Is
Lake.
this one here?
One word. Those are 2 words, but okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. It's
that's
right
it.
here.
That's
It
us.
showed up. Yep. Yep. So here's your address, and it shows you what micro community your address belongs to, and it shows you in the map on the right-hand side. See here, it shows you that whole neighborhood and how the map is laid out and where you guys are in that micro community.
Thanks.
So now you guys will know when we go back to the crime map, really what you're looking at. And you may have other neighborhoods of interest, right? I know as you pop over to the left and right, there's going to be some really close or bordering neighborhoods. And the cool thing is you can look at those too. But right now, as we sit here with this address, it looks like what we call you guys is Roosevelt and Ravenna, and we lump that in together. I know that's maybe not how you identify, but just this is always a healthy exercise, because it's how we've put it together in our data system. So Jen, if you want to go ahead and just click back, we should be able to just go back 1, 2 times and get back to the crime dashboard?
Yep, we are back at the dashboard.
Wonderful. So now what we can do, now we know what our micro community policing plan is. So Jen, if you want to go ahead and use that filter and just drop it down and select all, so we clear all the other filters, and then go ahead and just scroll down the right-hand side with that gray bar. And then you'll want to go ahead until you find Roosevelt Ravenna. Check that box and click apply.
All right, we did that. And now it shows in the map the same view that we were looking at with that other map. Here's an image of our micro community. And then as Mark is about to describe, I imagine, here is the data just for that micro community.
Correct. So now what we've done is we've isolated for 2021, at least that's what mine's on, Jen. I don't know, I'm not sure if you're back to 2021, but we have both violent and property crime here split out for almost to the end of the year for the full last year for that entire neighborhood, so that we could kind of get a sense of what type of crimes were reported. Now, the other thing we can do here is, as I've showed you before, is if you scroll down, you can look at that line just for the neighborhood, and you can get a sense from a monthly standpoint how many reports came in. So as you can see, I'm looking at 175 in January, and then it goes down a little bit in February, shorter month, right, to 148, up to 159 in March, and so on and so forth, as well as being able to turn on prior years. So Jen, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just go ahead and click on 2020 one more time and click apply, so that we can kind of add that neighborhood trend line for them.
All right.
And then we can kind of toggle back down a little bit.
Yep. So now we can see, so gray is the 2020 and then blue is the 2021. And we can see how one year compares to the other month by month on this map down here.
Correct. And this allows us to do a few things, right? I mean, we can ask some questions of it. We can see how things were trending. We can see, you know, what months seem to be higher. We could even add a couple more years and say, hey, we all know we've gone through some very anomalous behavior over the last couple of years with the pandemic and other things that obviously have influenced a lot of our lives. So, you know, we can go back to 2019, 2018, just to get a sense of how things have been moving in that neighborhood for us, as well as being able to select out certain months or just starting to look at certain categories. So before I move on, are there any questions specifically about this? Because once you kind of understand the layout and basis of this, you can do a lot on this website.
Well, there does seem to be a big change from January, April through October between the two graphs. And do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can tell you, I mean, there's been a lot going on over the last couple of years. We've seen, I mean, obviously you're right. When we look back in 2020, we kind of seen two different trends occur when it came to crime, as those of us who were paying attention to it. One was, I think everybody remembers when businesses started to shut their door, we saw a lot of interesting stuff happen. We saw a decline in some of shoplifting. Like our highest crime category, no matter what we do, is low-level property crime. We very much care about the more severe crimes, right? The assaults, the shootings, the rapes, the robberies, those are heinous, and we care about them more. They carry more weight. But just by volume, sheer volume, which really ends up impacting a lot of our crime data, happens to be all the little stuff we get around shoplifting, and businesses were impacted in 2019 and 2020 in a really unique way. A lot of it had to do with businesses opening and closing doors. And so a lot of the fluctuation you'll see comes in and out of that. But with new circumstances also come new opportunities. So while we saw certain kind of trend shift, if you will, then we saw other things kind of go up. Like, I mean, one of the examples I give is, you know, while we weren't seeing maybe as many residential burglaries because more people were home, we started to be more concerned about commercial businesses that were left unattended. We also became more concerned about domestic violence related incidents as they live in assaults. A lot of time robberies, just something to share with this group, is they can end up starting off as shoplifts inside of a store, but then they become aggressive when there's a confrontation from an employee or a loss security prevention personnel who tries to intervene, and then all of a sudden the situation that started off as a simple theft becomes a threat or even a robbery if there are goods that have become, taken, forcibly grabbed, threatened, thrown. So these circumstances can change a lot. But I think overall, to answer your question about that trend line, it has a lot to do with the operation and opening and closing of businesses in the pandemic. We just saw a major upturn when things came back online and people finding different opportunities to get into, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Thank you.
So, yeah, no problem.
Claudia,
one
did you
thing
have
I'd
a
like to-
question?
I didn't find the apply button except the blue one up in the blue bar up high, and it doesn't apply.
So depending on which one you're selecting, it's right here. So it's going to be on the bottom of that. So for example, here, I'm going to shift this for a second. So if I'm going to adjust the years, for example, say I wanted to add 2019, I would click on this box and then apply is going to light up for me on the bottom right of that bar. So see how it's right here. It kind of is hidden there, but it shows AP. That's the apply button.
I'm looking at this on my own computer,
Okay.
and okay, it's in a gray bar.
Yep, it's in the gray
AP?
bar at the bottom. Yep, AP. That'll be the apply
Okay.
button. So you click on that and then that
Okay.
will apply the changes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I did. That's exactly right. I have both lines on now.
Great. I'm glad.
Awesome.
21. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yep, of course.
I just didn't see it.
So another thing I'll show you that you may have not noticed yet is we've only been on the very first tab of what we call the crime dashboard. If you guys notice, Jen, if you'll go right up to the top where it says crime dashboard, we have a series of tabs that go across the top. They say shootings and shots fired, crime rates, and then finally we have one that says methodology. If you go to that very second one, Jen, if you'll click on that, what we're going to go into is our citywide shootings and shots fired report. And I'll explain a little bit about what this is. This is a newer report that is think of it as a subset of the data we were looking at on the previous tab. But this is very specific data that serves a very specific reason. So obviously folks will ask and are concerned about gun activity and crime gun activity very specifically. So a couple of things to note, and all of this is in here, but I'll just tell you so you don't have to search around for it, but we do have definitions at the bottom. We do not include officer-involved shootings in this particular data set. We do not include suicides, accidental discharge, or any kind of self-inflictions. Now, that's not because we don't look at information like that. It's just that it has a different venue. So for instance, officer-involved shootings, those are undertaken in a different light. Those are investigated by both independent and dependent committees and commissions, and they go through all of that. So really what we're talking about here is criminal gun activity that we try to keep an eye on. So while we have a much appreciation for the broader gun activity as a whole, and we know it impacts the community in all kinds of ways, what we've tried to capture here is as it relates to crime specifically. And unfortunately, an accidental discharge or even a self-infliction isn't necessarily always a crime, right? They are circumstances that need to be addressed in different ways, but we don't necessarily consider them crimes. We don't always prosecute them, of that nature. So what we're looking at here really falls into three categories. This is basically where we recovered evidence. Somebody called us and said, hey, I think I heard a gunshot, or I believe someone shot at a car, or someone shot at a house. And we arrive at the scene and there's evidence. We pick up casings, bullet fragments. There's an eyewitness who said, I saw somebody pull out a gun. Or we end up with somebody who's injured, right? Somebody who needs to go to the hospital. Sometimes we even go to the hospital to take a report. And then obviously if somebody is hit, that injury can be fatal and it can be non-fatal, meaning, depending on where they were hit and the level of care they received, that can end a little bit differently. So we capture this in a couple of different ways as an attempt to be able to share gun activity in the city and the way that we think the community would be concerned about. So what we're looking at right now, this is the same update that you saw on the previous page. This was through the end of November. And what this is showing you is through the end of November, we confirmed a total of 553 confirmed shots fired and shootings citywide. And what you'll see under there is a bit of a breakdown. That big blue box, the largest chunk, that 396, are all the instances where nobody was hurt, but for some reason, we either recovered property damage, we picked up casings and put them into our system to be able to let our forensic people try to connect them, or there were eyewitnesses to somebody who shot at something and then took off. But one reason or another, we verified that somebody fired a gun within the city, which is a crime. Then we moved to the 126, which means that somebody was shot. And these are incidents. These aren't people. I should mention that there can be multiple people in an incident, although not common. It can happen, but we're looking at everything on an incident level. So that means there's 126 incidents that occurred through November of last year where somebody, at least one person at the very least, was hit, but it wasn't a fatal injury, meaning that they received a gunshot wound but were treated and they fortunately lived. Then we moved to the highest bracket, which is 31 through the end of November of last year, where somebody was shot, unfortunately, and the injury was fatal. We have the exact same comparison to the right for the previous year. As you can see, we had quite an uptick in activity in 2021. And then, as I mentioned before, the map to the right is the same map that you were looking at on the previous page, which is broken out by neighborhood. And you can do all of the same things that you can do in the previous dashboard, which is you could look at Roosevelt, Ravenna. Another quick little trick, Jen, if you want to show them, is you could actually just hover on the map. And if you go over Roosevelt, Ravenna, you can see that so far in 2021, there were 5 incidents that occurred out of all those 553 of the whole city. And if you want to take it one step further, Jen, if you click on that neighborhood, you'll be able to see the total amount of incidents that occurred just for that neighborhood. So this is just another way of doing the same thing. So whether it's easier for you to click on the map, you're a very visual person, or you'd rather go up to the top and use your filters like we showed you before, it's 2 ways to do the exact same thing. And then if you want to release it, Jen, if you want to show them that, all you have to do is click on the neighborhood one more time. And what that will do is that will release the neighborhood and take you back out. Sorry if I'm moving a little quick. Just some little tips and tricks.
I had a mishap here. So there we go. Back to the whole city now.
Right. And once again, you can see below, we show those trends. So things that are very interesting as we follow along months and activity. It's not uncommon for us to see an uptick in criminal gun activity in the city as we approach the warmer months. That is something that unfortunately has always occurred throughout time. There's just more people out and about and enjoying the city, younger folks, there's a lot tied to this, but we do see that throughout the years. But once again, something to be able to monitor and look at. And once again, we're actually currently working on the year-end report, which I was just reviewing today with my team. So I know where we stand overall. And that's something that we will submit up to the chief's office and out to the public here in the next couple of weeks so that they can review really just a lot of stuff. And we will put that on this website as well. And Jen could always share with you where to find that, but it's kind of a neat high-level overview just to kind of read through. It's kind of like our year-end summary of what we saw.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Okay, so where are the incidents where there were police shooting? Where is that recorded?
Sure.
You said that was not.
Correct. I did say that. So that is a separate dashboard. That's actually a data set that, Jen, if you want to, I don't want to go into it too much, but if you want to go over to the left, you see where it says use of force, Jen?
Yep.
Now, if you expand that, the third option down is going to say officer involved shooting dashboard. And we're going to crawl away from our other dashboard a little bit. And this is not a dashboard maintained by my team, just to be clear. But these update at a little bit of a slower pace. But just to answer your question, these are tracked and held in a different light. But because there's so much to this. They don't get published out until they go through their full kind of independent investigation and findings were submitted. And once those have happened, right, because somebody could end up getting charged, not charged, there's all the stuff that can go on. But once it's finalized, it ends up in this data. So very similar in its presentation, but just separated out because very much a different type of thing that we have a little more information on, and it is handled in a different way.
But as you can see, I'm going to just hover over a couple of the things that you can look at in this dashboard specifically, looking at whether it was fatal or non-fatal officer-involved shooting, the weapon that the subject had with them, or if they did not have a weapon, the total of rounds fired, and then down here, there's the subject's race, the officer's race, subject demographics, so number of records, average age, and then demographics about the officer as well. So number of years of service and other information on this dashboard. But one of the things that Mark mentioned is that there's lots of different dashboards. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see all the different types of data that we have available. So you can look at so use of force is where we're currently living right now, but we could also look at crisis contacts or bias crime units or Terry stops. Or CAD dashboards. All this stuff is all available here, and all of them, as Mark said, work fairly similarly. So if you feel comfortable with kind of the different toggles and the different drop-down menus, you can kind of play around and click on different dashboards to see different things that you might want to look at.
Thanks.
I have one, just a
Sure.
silly question. What is a Terry stop?
Ah,
Terry.
that's a good question. Mark, would you like to explain what a Terry stop is?
So yeah, the purpose of a Terry stop, it actually comes from a legal case. It's called Terry v. Ohio, I believe was the actual case that came out. But what it does is it was a legal precedent that was set a long time ago that when an officer has reasonable suspicion to articulate that somebody may be carrying a weapon, or maybe they received information about someone standing on the corner with a gun, this is where somebody can introduce themselves and do a quick kind of pat down for officer and community safety to make sure that there's not a weapon on them. And the reason that those are tracked is because obviously if those aren't done in the right light, they're there to protect, the law is there to protect the officers and the community, right? But also it's there to protect the community from officers and make sure that folks aren't just getting shook down and, people are jumping out of cars and telling you to get against a wall and giving you a pat down. So they can be controversial around the country, but the reason that the Seattle Police Department is transparent with it is because we're showing you every time we do a Terry stop, we document it. And we document the reason for why we did that Terry stop. And we show you the individuals and the number of incidents that are associated with it, so that we're just showing you, yes, this is a technique that the Seattle Police Department engages in. And on top of that, here are the demographics of the people that we're stopping and the reasons, if weapons were recovered and what came out of it, and so on and so forth. So hopefully that answered your question, but yeah, it's basically a pat down. It's kind of what it comes down to.
I have another
And-
question.
I just want to
Um,
mention something really quick, Ruth, before you mention your question. Just to touch on Laurel's question again. When you click on that Terry stop link, that's what I'm on right now. It actually has a pretty good description of what that is that Mark was just talking about. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what a Terry stop is, here's some more information about that and how we use it. And then over here, you can go to that dashboard to see the data that Mark was talking about. All right, Ruth, go
So-
ahead.
Okay, so one of our buildings has been broken into 6 times and things have been stolen from it. How would we find out if you found the culprit or where it is in the investigation, whether you've recovered the property, whether this person was dangerous? Or people, it's 6 times, could be 6 different people, I suppose.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Unfortunately, that's nothing that this data is going to provide an answer to, is the short answer to it. But with that being said, the best way to go about something like that is really to just do a records request information. I mean, folks are entitled, we have a very open records request policy for the entire state of Washington. And we have a whole unit who's actually dedicated to getting folks that information. So what you could do, because what I would have to do is, we're looking at data kind of from the 30,000 foot level here.
Right.
Really, once we start to dive down, we'd be looking at certain report numbers, incident numbers, and each one of them would have their own findings attached to it, right? So, the only thing I could really think of off the top of my head would be to request exactly that, which we do have channels through this website as well to do a records request and saying that, you're interested in, what the outcome was there. And if, you could get copies of the reports, or, maybe even having someone get in touch with you, if they were followed up on, at least you could see that. Because without looking at the reports, I have no idea, like, were they assigned anybody? Because I will say for follow-up units, for them to get assigned to a detective, there have to be certain elements present, right? There have to be solvability factors, and there's, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of detectives in the city in comparison to the amount of crime we have. So it's kind of a, is there any evidence present? Is there anything to go off of? Are there video camera? And they will follow those things up. I mean, those are leads, right? And there's evidence. But when it gets down to the crimes of it just being broken into a bunch and there's nothing left over, I hate to say it, but a lot of times there's not much to it.
Can I ask a question?
So
Sure, of course.
not
Alan.
clear, not clear. Wait. I'm not clear on this. I asked for a records request. How do I do that?
I can show you. So
Okay.
we're on the SPD homepage right now, right? So we go back
Uh-huh.
to sort of the homepage. So if you click on SPD, or if we just Google SPD, this is the homepage.
Uh-huh.
Right here under top requests is public disclosure requests. If you click on that right here, it'll open to a page where there are multiple different ways to submit a public records request. So there is a public information request. So you can make a request about an initial police report, a collision report, or clearance letter. So it has all the descriptions here, and it'll tell you how to do that. And then down here, it'll say, how do I do that? And you click this button and you can submit the request. There's lots of different fields to go through of how you would like the information given to you. Do you want it emailed? Do you want it printed? Do you want it sent to you? But there's all different kinds of records that you can submit and ways to do that. And this website shows you how to do that.
So that's pretty onerous. And there are a lot of us, I mean, like 200 of us live here, and we would like to know what's going on. Is there something easier than having to go through all this and then having to maybe get a report and then having to sort through the report? Can we just call somebody and find out?
So Ruth, one of the things that we talked about when I was there last was that I'm a good resource for you. So if it's something that I can answer, then I can give you the information. There are certain things that I can't answer, like for example, what is the name of the person that was arrested? I cannot give you that information, right? But there are some things I can share with you, like for example, was an arrest made or was an arrest not made? That's something I can tell you. There's, like I said, certain things I can share and certain things I cannot, but I am a resource. And Alan and I are also, in good communication. So if there's something specific that you'd like to know, for example, there was an incident on this date at this time, here's the incident number. I would like to know if someone was arrested. I can say yes or no.
I think
And what's your phone number?
My phone number?
Yeah.
206
Uh-huh.
471
Uh-huh.
2849.
Can I just add, I think last time you mentioned calling North Precinct Patrol. Is that an
Yep.
appropriate thing to do too?
Yes, it is. So Ruth, so I do not work 24/7, 7 days a week, right? But patrol officers do. So another great resource is just to call the North Precinct directly. Most of the time, given staffing and unless there's extenuating circumstances, there is an officer that sits at the desk at the North Precinct just to specifically answer questions like this. So I would like to know what happened with this incident, and they can give you general information about what happened. Sometimes they cannot, so just keep that in mind. Sometimes there's sensitive information that they can't share. But the North Precinct is always a great resource too. So thanks, Alan, for bringing that up. Captain Grossman was at our meeting, I think, last time, and he shared that calling the North Precinct front desk is always a great option too. So there was an incident that happened last night. I would like to know if there was a conclusion, and that officer can give you as much information as they're able to share.
And what's that number?
I will pull it up for you
It's
right now.
I've got it. It's
Oh,
206
Uh-huh,
684
uh-huh.
0850. And that would
Yep.
that would be the
Great.
one to put on speed dial, I would think. Just
Correct.
kidding.
And
Just kidding.
Okay.
well,
but
that's the
seriously,
one
I
that-
think that's the direct route, right?
Yeah. So, and that's the one, like I said, that they answer 24/7, 7 days a week, 365, right? Calling me is always a great option and I can assist, but my schedule is, a little bit different. So I'm not available at 2 o'clock in the morning or on Sundays, for example.
Right. Okay,
Alan,
thanks.
did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
No, I just wanted to bring up that point because I could have sworn I remembered. I actually have the cards on my desk still because I didn't want to forget that they're a phone call away, and we all have phones in our apartments here. So I don't think you can, if you're worried, if you want to know what's going on. I mean, I like that Mark brought up that we have 5 incidents out of the 550 that have happened throughout the city. So it's a pretty small percentage. But if you want to know if this specific incident is resolved and if there's anything you can know about it, that's the number to call. And that it makes me happy to know that you can get in touch
Yep.
anytime.
Absolutely. And I'll also mention that if you are a victim of a crime, so for example, you are calling 911 for something that happened to you, or that you're witnessing, you can always request that the officers come and talk to you when they respond too. So for example, say you're sitting in your unit and you see something suspicious outside, maybe, walking around Green Lake or something suspicious outside, you call 911, you want to let the call taker know, I would like to talk to the officers when they respond here. And then you can hear directly from them what's happening or what their next steps might be, or if they made an arrest, or if they need more information, they might ask you. But if you're calling 911, be sure to let that call taker know if you'd like to talk with the officers that are responding.
Okay, thanks.
Do I have time for a quick question? It's sort of a generic question. And when you first brought up the map of the whole city for the year,
Sure.
I was noticing, because each MPC, whatever, yes, the community policing, each area, had the different shades. And I noticed in the South End, which we hear more about shootings and things like that, was very lightly colored. And so I'm wondering if things just aren't being reported by, is it a lack of reporting? There's probably a whole social issue here going on, I'm sure, but people don't call to let the police know something's happening. I'm assuming that's what the problem is.
Mark, do you want to touch on
Well-
that? And then I can also talk a little bit too.
Yeah, please do. Jen, if you wouldn't mind, will you bring up the shootings and shots fired and just make sure it's backed off to the 2021 data?
I got shootings
Yeah.
and shots fired up for 2021 and 2020.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the first thing I would say is, so down south has always had a historic concentration of our largest amounts of shots fired and shootings, and that still remains true today. And as you can see, actually, if you hover over Bright Dunlap, they were by far had the largest concentration for a geographic area throughout the entire city last year, and that is down south. So Jen, I don't know if you can see it. It's like the darkest spot down there actually. And this wasn't even complete. Remember, we're still missing the whole month of December in this particular data set. So that still does hold true. What I would say to you is I've paid attention to this an awful lot, so I can answer some things. We did see a big uptick this year, almost a 40% increase citywide in shots fired compared to last year. Now, what's interesting about that is the places that we saw them. And even though South has always been the most concentrated and continues to be the most concentrated, maybe meaning that the largest volume happened in the smallest area, we saw a pretty substantial growth both up north, but not near where you guys are at, but in Northgate and Lake City, as well as downtown, which was more near, Chinatown International District and, that Pioneer Square area. And obviously there's been a lot going on in the last, 2 years of the pandemic and some changes that took place in the city. But what I will say about the reporting question, because you bring something up, is we're always concerned about people not reporting crime. And I would hate to think that we ever get to a point of complacency where folks aren't calling. I will say, for when it comes to shots fired, I believe, as someone who studied this data for quite a while now, that our data is pretty accurate. And the only reason I say that is because of two reasons. One, when somebody gets hurt or gets injured, they don't necessarily have a lot of options but to go to the hospital. And we really end up recording that data, and that data is pretty good. Obviously, and unfortunately, the fatal data is probably about as accurate as it gets because somebody lost their lives, unfortunately. But then when somebody gets hurt or shows up at Harbor Medical View Center, we also get involved. So that data is pretty accurate. The other stuff, like I said, the reason this report is so good is we actually read through the reports, we vet the data, we try to toss out any of the noise where things weren't verified. But these are places where I don't think we've quite become the city like a New York or something else where, we turn a blind eye to hearing gunshot fire. I don't think we're there yet. That's, both my professional and personal opinion. While things will get missed for absolutely, there's no way we collect 100% of anything anywhere. I do believe that we do a pretty good job of capturing between people who are being injured and require medical attention and folks who are calling, because anytime there's a shot fired, that's a scary incident and people should be calling 911. And while there may be instances where it doesn't happen, luckily we have good bystanders who do call when they hear that type of stuff or see that type of stuff. So, I'm sure there's instances where we've missed that, but as a whole, just with the increase that we saw over last year, we had a 40% increase in the reports that we received. So either we're getting better at reporting or we had a more violent year last year.
Thanks, Laurel, for that question. I apologize, I had some chaos behind me for a second.
Thank you for the explanations.
Yeah, of course. And I think there's a couple other things to keep in mind, right? And I think Mark touched on this really well, that our data is only good as our reports are. So that continues to show how important it is that if you are witnessing or you're a victim of a crime, that it gets reported so that it gets recorded onto our dashboards so that we can use that information to hopefully better serve our communities. But it's also important to remember that media and maybe sometimes what we hear from others is not always accurate. So we want to be informed and take a look at things like this. Take a look at our crime data to see what's actually happening in our neighborhood, maybe then just taking what other people or media maybe says is happening. All right, well, I think that we're just a little bit over time, but Alan, did you have any sort of closing comments or any final questions for Mark before we allow him to get back to his afternoon?
I don't think so. I'll just add that, I'm kind of everyone's man in Panama. So if you get onto the crime dashboard and you want to dial 5204, I'm happy to help as much as I can. I may need to refer you to the experts, but I'm really appreciative that you, this is, I think, your 7th meeting today. I know you're going to sleep well tonight. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate Mark's willingness to call in and everybody's flexibility on meeting on Zoom. It's really nice to see each other's faces. This is a luxury that we don't normally have. And I think it is actually good for us. And greetings to viewers of the future, as we say hello to people on channel 370. Does anybody have any final questions or comments before we go? Claudia, you have to unmute yourself there. There you go.
I think that's an awesome program that they've developed or somebody has developed for them.
Yeah, it's impressive.
All the data.
I wish every police department would do this. Yeah.
Thanks, Laurel, and thank Claudia for that. I think that we owe that all to Mark and his team for creating this wonderful data that we have available to us. And thank you, Mark, for being here and for spending the last hour with us to talk us through how to get to this data.
You're most welcome. And
you.
thank you for the kind words. I'll be sure to pass them along to the team that worked very hard on keeping this information up to date for you. So thank you, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Mark, have a good rest of your day, everybody. We'll talk soon.
You as well. Thanks
Bye.
again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.